Okay, so it was, I think I'm right in saying the 11th of March, 2020. So just take you back in time a little bit. This was before the lockdown, but in the period of time when COVID was a massive deal, stock markets were crashing, borders had started to close, but they hadn't completely closed it about 2 weeks before the lockdown.
I mean, international borders and not the American bookshop.
No, that was still open.
That was still open. Good.
So I was in London. I didn't realize it at the time. Subsequently, it was the last time I would be in London until the next year, actually. So I was in London to talk to a very, very, very famous politician. I'm not going to say his or her name. But so in my mind, this entire sequence has taken on a sort of opening to a disaster movie quality, which I suppose it has, because I went down to London. It was a strange atmosphere, but maybe I'm reading that back. You know, I got the train down, got a taxi, all these things. I remember hearing about COVID on the news, on the radio, in the taxi, exactly at the start of a disaster movie. Anyway, got to this guy's headquarters. Nobody else was there, just him. I got a lift up to the top floor, and he was there in his office on his own. The first thing he said to me actually was, "They've just closed the border in Italy." And I said, "The bookshop?" And he said, "No, the border." No. So it was all very dramatic. But my job that day was to try and persuade him to come and work for the business that I was running at that point. Okay. So I knew I was there to pitch. I didn't want to come across as too much of a salesman. And I didn't want to twist his arm. And I didn't want to make a promise that I couldn't keep or that would cause problems down the line, because often people attach a lot of significance to the very first thing they hear from you. They sort of typecast you, if you want. That's kind of the wrong way of thinking about it. But the first things you say, the first claims you make, the first promises, that's how they're going to categorize you. So you've got to be really careful. So can you guess what I did for the first 30 minutes of that pitch?
If you enjoy The Fix and want to get access to even more good stuff, join the Fix Accelerator today. Get access to special masterclasses from Nick and me, watch expert interviews with industry legends, join live copy feedback sessions every week, and get connected to our very own private copy network. Visit thefixaccelerator.com for more information.
I mean, I feel like you might ruin it. I would say you gave the person reasons not to work with you.
That's right. You've seen me do this as well. Before I did anything, here's who I am. We never met before. We've been introduced by a mutual friend. I said, before we go any further, before we talk about all the things that we could do together and all the reasons why this might work, let me tell you all the reasons this would just be a disaster. You know, the things I went into, you know, if you don't want to work hard, if what you want is a kind of sinecure, if you just want to be paid for who you are and not what you have to say, it's not going to work. If you just want to talk about politics and not financial markets, it's not going to work. And I went on like that. Now, I found this to be a very persuasive and authentically persuasive technique just in general. I actually didn't employ it as a kind of Machiavellian technique. I just thought, I really don't want to do a bad deal here, so I've got to clear all this stuff out of the way. But leading with all of those things, all of those objections he might have, all of those misconceptions, I found to be a really, really effective way of actually down the line closing the sale or doing the deal or signing the deal, however you want to put it, a lot more straightforward. I do think it takes a bit of bravado to do it, to sit down with somebody and say, "Oh, you've frozen. Have you frozen?" "No, I thought you'd frozen right in the moment of my triumph there."
You froze, but I was pretending not that you hadn't, so that you'd continue to interrupt the flow that now can't be out.
You froze. No, you froze. You froze. You froze. So it takes a bit of balls, for want of a better word, to actually actually start like that, because it feels on one level like you're starting from a position of weakness. You're starting with all the reasons they shouldn't do something. But actually, I want to talk today about, I actually think as a copywriting technique and as a persuasive technique, it's not weak at all. In fact, it's the strongest thing you can do. And it's kind of the exact opposite to the way most people deal with objections within the context of a normal sales pitch. And that's what we wanted to talk about today, wasn't it? The objections people might have to our argument.
It is. Two things that I need to get off my chest. First of all, I was listening to the rest of history the other day, and they do that thing where there's two presenters for those who don't listen to it, but you should if you're a copywriter, because it's an information hub into your mind. But they do a thing where one of them will tell the story and the other kind of ask questions or what have you. And then sometimes they go, and what do you think, Dominic? And the other one goes, well, I know the answer because I've got the notes here.
Yeah.
And I was listening to it the other day and I thought, if I was in that situation, wouldn't I play along? And then the bit where I knew the answer there, I didn't play along. I pointed out things. So I forgive the negative thought I had towards the rest of this history the other day. The second thing I need to get off my chest is I was desperately thinking for the comedy punchline of a comical politician that I could say, and that's when you and insert comical name became friends. And you've gone for Diana Abbott. I was thinking of George Galloway, Michael Fabric came up. I was just trying to think, it's an interesting little game. Where's Streeting popped into my name just because he's on a lot at the moment? That would be a funny friend of yours, I think. But anyway, if you want a little side game at home, think of the most ridiculous politician for Nick to be friends with. But yeah, one thing you said there, and we're going to come to objections, and we're really talking about how you deal with objections and the importance of meeting them head on. But you said something that I'd perhaps like to just dig in slightly first. I don't think it's tangential. But you're saying about the idea of first impressions, and I guess this is the reason why you have to lead with objections. But it doesn't. You don't necessarily have to state the objection or do that kind of why you shouldn't work with me angle. I think what it's really about is philosophically being aware of the effect of a first impression. And by first impressions, to get away from as they were talking about body language and stuff and that kind of stuff, we're talking about a headline, a lead, like the early opening arguments of a sales piece. Being aware of that, you can then subvert it. And I think that's the key, is looking at ways you can subvert. Subvert's maybe not still might not be the right word, because that has like a negative connotation, but it's how can you turn the objection to your benefit? And I always do this where I go in, my first impression is often idiot, bit rambly, bit weird, not serious, silly man, kind, nice. Now I'm adding things to it, but I'm going to be that nice guy who's like, oh yeah, I'm your mate. I know that that's where I'm pitching myself. And then at some point in the sales argument for me, if I'm personally pitching myself, I'll twist that and go, no, you thought that, but actually now I've confounded your expectations and I can play that. And that's part of my own personal kind of approach. Again, it's not Machiavellian. It's because I've identified an objective to myself. Like I have to be natural like that. So I have to do that. How can I be aware of that and then use that to get to the end? So I guess what I'm just trying to say, slightly muddy example, but you need to be aware of the objections, be aware of what people are thinking of them. And then with that, how can you turn that? How can you use them to your advantage? I think that's the key thing with overcoming objections early doors, like early on in a sales pitch.
Well, let's talk about where you address them later. But first of all, let's talk about the first step, which is you said you've got to be aware about objections to your product or your pitch or your idea, whatever it might be. I'd say aware isn't a strong enough word there. You have to be hyper honest about those objections. So some point in your creative process, whether you're thinking about your idea, like your claim that you're going to make, or just the product that you have to sell, you should say, what are its weaknesses? Honestly, not in a like, in a coy, cheesy, cheap, funny way. Like, oh, it's so addictive. You'll end up in a crack house. Like, what are its weaknesses?
That was your pitch for toast, wasn't it?
Yeah, toast addiction is actually do you know what? Toast would substitute as a name for some sort of design.
It's the only legal drug. It's the only legal drug, toast.
Oh,
well buttered toast. Any time of the day.
Not cheap, not a cheap way of doing it. Actually, who doesn't your product work for? When doesn't it work? When might it be a bad idea? What are the genuine downsides of this? So, for instance, talking about cryptocurrencies, they are insanely volatile and very, very high risk. So these are objections. These are weaknesses. Now, they do the inverse in financial markets tends to be true. Things that are very, very high risk and very volatile tend to also have the potential to go very high. So it's connected. But be honest about those things with yourself, because when you're trying to pitch something, so for instance, like the pitch that I was making, the weakness there was, though I was talking to somebody who's very, very famous, I needed him to graft and be really willing to get in the trenches with us, so to speak, and really put a shift in. And we weren't interested in working. We didn't want somebody to be the face of something. That was not our pitch. So that's a weakness. We need you to really, really graft here. And you might not want to, and I would be fine, but I need to be honest with you. So hyper honesty about all of the objections at the start, because it's so easy to just ignore the objection and ignore the weakness and just think, well, it doesn't work. Oh God, if you wear this coat out in really cold weather, it actually catches on fire. But we won't mention that. What a terrible design flaw that would be.
Which, talking about positioning, I know I said we'd hold that, but that reminds you that if you are holding off on your objections, let's assume in a world where we're all legal and honest and above board, before you close the sale, you are going to need to talk about that objection. If you leave it, so as we're going through a promotion, a sales piece, or not even a sales piece, a sales process, you could say, because this applies to everything. So even if you had like a indirect advert outside on a billboard, but by the time you'd actually logged on and you got to the actual buying product, if it was a Diet Coke ad and you got there and the Diet Coke can's covered in glue and it's like, oh, sorry, yeah, all of our cans are covered in glue and you can't like put them down, you'd be like, what? Like, that's terrible. So it works across everything, not just long copy, all elements of copy. The longer you get down that process and the longer you hold back that objection, ergo, the closer you get to the point of sale. If you are going to do it before the point of sale and you're an honest person, then that means that the last thing that people are thinking about and dealing with at the point of sale are your objections, are the bad stuff and the negative stuff. If you are actually a bit naughty and put it after the point of sale, that's potentially even worse, because they're going to do it and they're going to refund you. So it's the further you put it back, there's a case that it makes your job harder. That objection is going to gather momentum almost. It's going to like gather it's going to get bigger and bigger in its perceived value. If you hit it straight up and go, look, this is a real problem, we need to deal with this, and you go, cool, that's not actually a problem, tell me about the other good stuff, and then you're in a better place going as you get further towards the point of sale.
There's more to it than that, I think, and that's absolutely right. But by holding off, for instance, on an objection until the end. By the way, the one thing I haven't told you is this: you look dishonest and you look weak. That is how you come across. That's how people like that are. You told me all the good stuff and you waited. You gave me a shit sandwich at the end. You're weak and you're dishonest. Nobody wants to buy from a weak, dishonest person. And if they do, they'll do it in spite of themselves. So to the extent that you care about your reputation and your brand, you don't have, it's negative. Even if you got the sale, they don't like you. Okay. So you as the messenger come across as you negatively impair your relationship with the reader, or the prospect, sorry, which is just counter to the entire object.
Good example of that, just because while it's on my mind, I just booked some flights to Bulgaria yesterday, and booking flights, that is like an Uber version of this, where it's just adding on trap after trap to the point where I'm buying the flight anyway because I need to fly. But the fact that you're doing all of this, I despise you. Like, at the end of that transaction, I've got these tickets despite myself. Everybody's probably been through that emotion, and that's what you're actually doing. You're adding obstacle after obstacle along the way. And yeah, you've got to buy the thing because I can't walk to Bulgaria. But like I do not like that company. I'm not happy about that. I'm not recommending that company. I will do all I can to buy with a different company next time. That's what's happening.
So one of the things we're going to talk about is inverting this whole process. So let's just take that as an example, just in terms of the positioning. What if, for instance, a flight provider gave you the price up front that was the full all-in price? So it was £100, say, and then on the next page said, would you like to make it cheaper by not reserving a seat, for instance? Click yes, and the price drops to 93, whatever. Wouldn't have to drop much, but it gets cheaper. So that's the most expensive you're going to find it, and then you take money off rather than starting low and say, well, would you like to put in the back? Would you like to reserve your seat? So invert the whole process, and the entire journey changes.
Yeah, what would happen as well is that people would probably be willing to pay more because you'll say to your friend, oh, you should do it there. Like, that first price is the highest thing. It will get cheaper. So you go, oh, cool. So as long as it gets a little bit cheaper, you'll be quite happy. But it might not get any cheaper than if you'd done the cheap ticket to begin with. So you can see all these things have that effect. I think that's a good idea. We should charge that to whatever airplane.
Somebody should do that. Anyway, we'll get slightly sidetracked. But so you've got to be hyper honest with yourself. What are the downsides? What don't people like about your product? Think about them. Don't hide them. Now, one of the sort of traditional ways we were taught when we were writing a long sales piece was to then rank those objections in order of when you think, in order of size, really, the hurdles you have to get them over, and then deal with the biggest ones first, and then that's how you would structure your promotion. So you would say, lay out all your objections. Like the first objection might be, well, this all sounds like bullshit. That's often the objection somebody might have to the type of work that we work in. You know, you've made a claim about the world that sounds like nonsense.
You're just heating up bread, and you're telling me that's better. It sounds like nonsense.
So, like, the objection might be, this sounds like bullshit. Who are you to make a claim like this? What do you know about the world? I'm still not going. So, and then that would be the way that you would structure your argument. So you would say, okay, well, first of all, we need to present the most compelling piece of proof that shows this isn't nonsense. Then we might need to credentialize ourselves, and then we might need to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a kind of 1 minute version of what the copyboarding technique is. Rank your objections and then use them to structure your piece. But I actually want to talk about something that an even sort of deeper version of this idea that starts with that same process of being really honest. But then takes it in a new direction. So what you have to do is fight the urge to hide the things that are weak about your product. You must shine a light on them, and shine a light on them as early as you can. And if you do it right, sometimes that can even become your idea. So we had this was a question in our Discord group. By the way, if you're not on the Discord, Fix Accelerator, £10, $12 a month. You get to come on our live calls, Discord of copywriters all around the world asking questions like this one. So one of the writers on there said, I'm selling this trading product. It's got a great track record, but it had a really nasty 4-month period of losing streak. So the overall track record's great. So we're not concerned that we're selling something that's defective. But if we display this on a chart, it's going to have a big downward spike, and then it's going to come back, and that's going to look bad. even though this has beat the market, you know, it's got happy customers and so on and so forth. Now, the question that he asked was, how should I display it graphically so that they don't see that spike? And while I think that's a reasonable question to ask yourself, I thought, well, the logic there is, how do I hide that? Not in a dishonest way, but just, it doesn't look great. We know the overall is, we want to focus on the overall, not the short term. And this period of time looks bad. But if you can just change your thinking and say, I have to show that. I have to feature that. And I need to be really open and honest about it. And really, to Glenn's point, I should do that as early as I can, because once I get that out of the way, I only have good things left to say.
Yeah.
And
so you could, I mean, to skip forward, the headline is like how the worst 4 months of my trading career helped me make thousands of pounds. You could literally lead on a headline that highlighted that, and then open, dear reader, it was the worst time of my life. I was like on the phone to my partner, ready to quit. I'd had loss after loss after loss after loss. And then on Tuesday, the 15th of November, I remember something changed. I got a winner again. And after that, it was up, 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 up and away kind of thing. So straight away, you could literally lead on that.
What I learned in the worst losing streak of my life, or I think I suggested in the group something that was like, why do so many people love this strategy that just lost money 4 months in a row? Something. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, oh, could you open a loop with it? Now, those may or may not be great ideas, but what they both do is they say, what if we foregrounded that? What if we use that to be our idea? Because, by the way, as an aside, if you do this, nobody else is doing that. Your copy will look unlike everybody else's copy, because the instinct most copywriters have is to hide the downsides and to bury them somewhere and hope nobody notices them, and then considering them.
Is it the Avis advert, we're the second best car company, so we don't have to?
Hertz, I think.
Yeah, whereas we have to try harder, kind of thing. Yeah. It's that same principle of if you shout about it. For some reason, I was thinking of old Rishi Sunak, bless him, when he came out off the back of all of the negativity in the Tory party that was going on at that time. I say this from a apolitical standpoint. The whole game, his whole pitch was, I'm going to be brutally honest and open about everything. And if he had done that, he probably would have been a damn sight in better water. But he didn't, and he was smeared in thing and what have you. And that just undermines it. And I was thinking about when you said this person asking this in an honest way, how do I hide that? It's our natural instinct is to do that, because we live in quite a dishonest society, quite a dishonest advertising industry. Generally, we just all assume advertising is lying to us. So we are forced into that mindset. But even so, it's no one's fault. It's just the way it's become.
True.
If you can be ultra open and ultra transparent, you're going to set yourself aside.
You also, let's talk about the most dishonest people in the world, since you just brought them up. Politicians, far more dishonest than somebody writing an advert for Diet Coke, because you can just ignore an advert, whereas politicians are able to, reach their grubby little hands into your life. All political announcements follow the same principle, which is, I'll tell you about the benefits and I'll let somebody else later tell you about all the downsides. They do exactly the same thing. So all they do is make themselves look dishonest, because they didn't tell you any of that stuff. Now, let's for instance, just imagine a world, let's say during the pandemic, when there was lots and lots of emergency programs, like furlough and things like that. They were very, very expensive. You can argue whether they're necessary or not, but they were extraordinary things to happen. Now, you could make an argument that if a politician came out and said, there will be a price to pay for doing this. This is not risk-free. What we are doing will have consequences, and not all of those consequences are good, and we'll face them together as a country. But we have decided that those consequences are worth it. So if they'd started with the idea that, because all politics is about winners and losers, there's no universal way of making everybody happy. There just isn't. You have to be shuffling things around. But were you just start with the fact that it could go wrong, or there might be downsides, or there will be a cost to pay? So for instance, you could say, spending extraordinary amounts of money in the pandemic was almost certain to lead to inflation, which it did. It's not the only reason, but the two things might have been perceived differently by the public had there been a more honest approach taken to the messaging. Now, sorry, just to get away from politics, you power up your message by being honest about it. You are a more authentic voice. You are a more persuasive voice. You are a less weak communicator. You're a stronger person for saying, here are the downsides. Let me tell you about them. But for all of these downsides, there's an upside that could be 10 times bigger than what I'm telling you. Okay, now I can get into the good parts and start to tell you about all the great things about my product. And I've not got to worry that, oh crap, I've got to tell them that, oh, in 2 pages time, I've got to bring up that massive catch, which is you can only buy my product if you live on the moon. Ooh, you know what I mean? Like, so by fighting your instinct to bury something, you power up the message once you actually do get there. And I think that's the message. That's the lesson from dealing with objections. It's that be honest about them, address them as early as you can, perhaps even build your argument and your pitch around one of them, because nobody else will do that. Won't work every time, but nobody else will do it. I guarantee you that. Nobody thinks, oh, we should build our marketing campaign around the weakest feature of our product. Nobody thinks that. But by doing it, you differentiate yourselves and you change the way your message will be perceived.
It's why we built the fix around our faces. The weakest element of our offering.
Well, yeah. Well, wasn't it? Do you know what? Funny little inside baseball fact. The pictures of us that feature on all of our marketers is just a picture of our heads, isn't it? One from the side. I know for a fact that Gemma took a picture of my head while we were on holiday, while she was holding my kid. She was like, oh, fine, you need a picture. It's done so quickly and haphazardly, and it's across all of our branding.
We fixed it for the rest of time.
Yeah, even more inside baseball. We've always, in the work that we do at The Fix, been very clear that copywriting isn't easy. That it takes time. That you can't. There are no shortcuts, and to the extent that they might accelerate things, but you're still going to have to go through a lot of pain. Yeah. Nobody wants to hear those things, but they are true.
I'm almost to the point where I imagine I'd bore myself, but I get bored of telling everybody that it's all nonsense out there. Like it's mostly crap. Like it just is. I get emails from the biggest, like the main people, like not just people, but organizations and stuff, and it's just awful. Like
just go back. What do you mean by the main people?
The main people, the most successful or perceived as successful copywriters and marketers and businesses selling advice on what we do. And it's just mostly, for the most part, don't get me wrong, there's some fantastic, wonderful people out there doing some great work. But for the most part, it's absolutely abysmal. That's not a good way to lead, like a marketing thing. Like that's not what people want to hear. It's hard. We're slightly perverse as we're doing this pleasure. But at the same time, we know, hopefully, that we create a more loyal customer base. Sorry to describe you as a customer, but we have more loyal followers. We have friends. Like most of our people on Discord, I would consider them like mates. Like we'll go for a drink, we'll speak to them. We've got nicknames. We muck about. They muck about. But we muck about like there's a bit of a thing.
It's just, sorry, all of our nicknames for our lovely Fix readers, all normal, nothing weird, definitely nothing weird. But just the point I would make is it's better to have an honest relationship with somebody than a dishonest one. So as a copywriter, the reason that you're valued by the business that you work for, whether it's your own business or somebody else's, is that if you do your job right, you can instigate a relationship that is valuable to both parties, the customer and the business. And the more honest you are, the more that relationship is built on honesty, the better for everybody. So just to quote something that like Dan Dennings, who's a sort of mentor of mine when I was a publisher, he used to say, you get the customer that you ask for, which is a very Dan Denning phrase. But I come back to that quite a lot, that maybe you ask for the customer that you want through your behavior, through the messaging that you put out there, through the mode that you use to communicate, through the things you choose to give prominence to. So, the more honest and open you can be, the better the relationship with the reader. And believe me, it's better to have a smaller number of very good customers who like you and trust you and know who you are authentically than a big number of people who've bought into your bullshit. Believe me.
I'm ever having a toast party with them, and only with authentic people can you ever hope to achieve the toast party that we are planning in the future.
Right, let's wrap this up. We'll send details of the next toast party out via the Discord.
Bring a blunt knife and your choice of spread. Some might want low cholesterol spread. Some might want pure butter. Who knows what's out there? Someone might come with pesto. Someone exciting out in the world brings pesto to a toast party. Could you imagine it? Anyway, let's
right. We're waffling. Thank you very much, everybody. We will see you again next week after, whenever we see you, we'll see you.
We're in Paris next week, so we might not see them.
I'll get you to record something while we wander around talking about Paris.
That might be the episode. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
That's all for this episode, but if you'd like to get your copy reviewed, or you've seen some copy you want Nick and Glenn's opinion on, get in touch at feedback@thefixcopywriting.com. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and share.